AELA is formed and doing lots of interesting discussions around this topic of how do we have Earth jurisprudence, or how do we actually, as a whole, look after the Earth in more ways than just farming, and looking at the legal and the regulatory sort of stuff around all of that, because it's a big part of the picture. I was once a dairy farmer, born and bred a dairy farmer down in a little town called Larpent in Victoria, in the Western Districts of Victoria. About 22 inches of rainfall a year, so dry, so non-irrigated, dry farm, milking about 310 mixed herd of Jersey cross Friesians, because at that time the push was for quantity of milk, not quality of milk. So we brought in all these bloody black and white, big black and white things that were as soft as butter, and didn't have anywhere near the character that an old Jersey cow has. What's that?
You couldn't feed them.
Couldn't feed the Friesians? No, they bloody ate way more than they put out in milk.
You were conned.
The whole world has been conned. So I bought the farm off Mum and Dad because Mum and Dad didn't want to really go down that organic pathway, and I was really committed to that. My epiphany to organics come through one day when I was doing, and I was on the pathway to milking 1,000 cows and doing it all conventionally, and Dad was conventional and using a lot of chemicals for red-legged earth mite and aphids and all of those things, and lots of chemical-based fertilisers that Dad was into a regime of. When I come back to run the farm with Dad, after about 6 months, realised there was another voice out there saying different things, and as I listened more to that voice and questioned it, because I was so keen to learn as much as I could about farming and how to manage a farm and all that sort of thing, I was taking everything on board. And one day I was at a Bonlac were our dairy company cooperative, well, Bonlac corporation, I should say, because the farmers had no longer had a vote. I asked this really innocent question about urea fertiliser, and I said, does urea, I said, I've just been reading a bit about how urea freezes the microbes in the soil. Is that correct? So it was put on by Bonlac, out at a farm, sponsored by Pivot and Highford. Wrong place to ask that question, but in my naive way, put it out there, and in a really innocent way. But the response I got from the person who was holding the event and the other people who were around him was very aggressive. Like, they didn't, attempt to answer the question. They just attempted to make me feel small and ridiculous for asking the question. And after sort of retreating from that and thinking about it later on, I thought, hang on, there must be more in this, if that was the approach they were going to take. And that led me down the pathway to a course I did where the guy who held the course, he said the secret to good dairy farming or good dairy husbandry is to see your farm through your cow's eyes. And once I started to look through the cow's eyes at everything, fences, tracks, how I brought them into the dairy, the feed they were eating, everything changed. It was just like, there was a fork in the road, and this one took me down this direction. And anyone who approaches anything around sustainability, that road is, you never turn back. It's just poles apart, and this one's so much more exciting, so much more challenging too. But that's what we're here for. We're not here to have some sort of easy path. That would be just boring. So I bought the farm off. So I headed down that pathway, come to blows with Mum and Dad, ended up buying it off them, and as soon as I bought it in April, I bought it in April. 2 months later, the opening milk price was 20% below what the finishing price was the previous year, and I'd only budgeted on making about $14,000. And we went into drought. The autumn break didn't occur where it normally occurs around March, April. Didn't occur until June. I soldiered through that year. Luckily, I was going organic because I could save a heap of money by not using chemicals and fertilisers and all that sort of stuff. But the next year, the opening price was 10% lower again. And the third year of my farming was 5% lower again, the opening price. And it just, and not to mention 3 years of drought, so those 3 years. So I was out the door. But the conversations I had with a lot of farmers, because farmers were obviously There was a lot of suicide, there was a lot of issues becoming apparent in this sort of circumstances where we were forced to take nothing for our milk. And Coles and Woolies, you know, you walk into Coles and Woolies and there was the milk at this price and you know how much you're getting for it and you just question that whole thing. So there were dairy farmers getting together and talking about how can we get in front of, how can we design our own destinies, how can we do something about this for our own sake. And 8 farmers did some research and we uncovered the model of CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, which had been happening in the States, mainly around veggie farms, where we thought, is there an opportunity for dairy farmers to actually embark on a similar model where people could pay in advance and we could have locally processed milk and have our name on it and have field days where people could come and pat calves or get their hands sucked by calves and all of those things that we thought would be really cute and empowering. But I lost the farm and went into a completely cathartic experience where I nearly committed suicide, but I didn't own a gun, which was my saving grace. Every other farmer did, and it was happening everywhere, and it was so easy to go and do. The depression was everywhere. It was just a shocking scene. When I lost the farm, when I finally made the decision, it's all over, and the banks can have it. I went 2 weeks without washing, you know, still milking the cows, without showering or anything, just sleeping in my own bed with cow manure all over me for 2 weeks. And a whole bunch of my friends come and got me one day and said, we're going to go out for drinks tonight. We're going to, you know, turn this into a part, you know, say goodbye in a proper way. And I finished milking that night, went home, and I thought, well, I better have a shower. And I had a shower, and I was 35. And the shower's on and all this shit and mud and dust is coming into the bath, you know, shower with a bath on it, and it's all running down because the thing, and it's all this mud and dirt, and suddenly I had this epiphany that I could start life afresh. I had nothing, you know, and I thought, this is just the most amazing thing. I had no responsibilities. I had nothing. I lost my farm. I had no money. You know, and the other thing that come with it was I had 10 years in the Navy, where I really didn't think I contributed much at all. But this farming, this 3 years of 7 years of farming, 3 years as a share farmer for Dad, and then 3 years as the owner, 3.5 years, was the most inspiring part of my life. And I thought, I really have only been on the planet 7 years, really contributing, and I'm 35, you know, and I've got till I'm 100. So that means I've got, you know, 65 years left to put into practice some of the stuff and learn so much more. And I felt it was just remarkable. So I got changed, went to the pub, happy as Larry, and all my mates are really sad because they're all thinking, shit, you know, what's going to happen to us? And Robert's lost his, and mates have committed suicide, and the footy club's closed down, and land care's, you know, not doing well, and all the things we're really interested in were just sort of. The Bonlac had been sold to the New Zealanders and they'd taken over and we were getting less per our milk, and it was just crap all around, and I was happy. But of course, and I got dragged away and did some Vipassana meditation, and but somewhere in that I got committed to not just walking away from it all, but actually thinking about solutions. How can I put a solution on the ground that could contribute something back from that epiphany in the shower? And thought, well, I need to find out where a CSA is. And I lived for 6 months in the bush in Tasmania and found out where there was a CSA. So I lived completely off the ground, had sprouts growing and, you know, noodle packs and all those sorts of things. Not a great diet, but I meditated and did a lot of yoga and walked countless miles with 20 kilos of books on my back, just reading and understanding what I was, and particularly the Indigenous situation, because when I lost my farm, apart from that epiphany where I thought, wow, I've got so much, there was still a lot of anger, a lot of rage, a lot of very pent-up emotions around my dream had gone on that dairy farm that had been there for 4 generations, and I was the 4th one. I was lost. And so I was still going through shit, you know, it wasn't all I'm happy and things are going to be great. And I remember the first person I bumped into in Tasmania when I tried to sneak a nap in a bit of land near in Devonport was an Aboriginal, huge Aboriginal fella come walking towards me in the dark to say, hey mate, you can't camp there, you know. And I looked up and said, oh shit, well, where am I? And he said, you're on Aboriginal land. And then he sat down next to me on a big rock and he said, where are you from? And I told him a bit of my story. And he said, right, you can stay here. And he gave me all, and I said, my first thing, I thought all you black blokes were killed during the line, that line. I was taught that at school. And he said, laughed, he said, no, we ran rings around him, we ran around and we ducked in the bush. He told me all these amazing stories that were just amazing. But I said, listen, I've lost my farm, 4 generations. How must you guys feel, getting all the stuff that's happened to you after 20, 30 or 40,000 years? How do you guys cope? Like I'm really angry inside. And just had this wonderful experience of realising that he was this noble people who had suffered at the hands of us, and I was feeling a bit sorry for myself. Yeah. So anyway, all those things make up how you think and how you approach life and how you go about putting solutions on the ground. Found a CSA in Tasmania, run by a fella, Mark, on a Steiner school. He let me camp there for 5 or 6 weeks to watch the whole thing. And the very first Friday, about 10 people turned up from Hobart to help harvest the crop that about 30 people had bought, had pre-bought. And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, because as a dairy farmer, the only contact I had with people who drank my milk was the milk tanker driver as he waved as he drove down the track. That was the closest I got to the people who drank my milk. And here I was on this farm where 10 people had come to harvest it who also were eating it, and then later in the afternoon 30, 40 people turned up to take this box away, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I thought, this is what farming should be about, this interaction with the people. This is, you're actually growing for them, and they're there with you, and they appreciate you, which you never get as a farmer, and you'll put more into growing that food. It's just such an amazing experience. So then I dedicated my life. I set up another CSA just down the road, 6 kilometres. Yes.
Sorry, what's the CSA?
Oh, community supported agriculture. So it's a risk sharing model where people subscribe in advance for the food that they're to eat. So they basically pay the farmers in advance for, not all of it, but for them sowing the seeds and doing all that work. Because, a garlic crop in Tasmania is a 9-month crop. A leek crop is about 6 months, 7 months, So all of those things. So it brings people closer to the effort and what it takes to actually grow food that they, don't take for granted much. I set up 6 of those CSAs all over Australia. I got a bit of a name for setting up these CSAs with farmers, and I was a journeyman. I was just basically with my backpack, my old Dodge ute, and a couple of things, and would just basically stay in their sheds and help them set up a CSA, whether it was in Western Australia or Victoria, and gradually made it to Brisbane. And all the time thinking there must be a better way, because in the Australian context this wasn't working. We needed to have a model where farmers could collaborate together at a large scale, where consumers could get more choices than just the standard CSA box, which is sometimes very limited. In winter in Tasmania, it's not real fun to get just, potatoes, carrots. Not even carrots, actually. You can't even grow carrots in Tasmania in winter. And I was on the radio, coming back from, ABC just rang me up out of the blue and said, would you come on the show? I was on the show, a whole bunch of Brisbane mums. Is that time? No. Whole bunch of Brisbane mums rang in after the show, really excited, and said, where is anything up here in Brisbane? And I said, well, there is none. But I'm talking to a whole bunch of farmers about the idea, and they basically, those Brisbane mums, forced Food Connect to happen in Brisbane. They designed the City Cousin model, which is a community-based food distribution scheme. So it's not through your normal bricks and mortar retail shops. It's all through pop-up garages, buyers groups, mums at home, where the boxes, the set boxes. So that was 10 years ago, in 2004. We did a trial in 2005, we formally launched. And since then, lots more box systems are now in Brisbane. There's a lot of collaborations. ASFA, I was part of the founding members of ASFA. There's been so many things that have come out of those Brisbane mums coming together to support me bringing a concept to reality. And now, now we're starting to see a lot of awareness. Back 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of awareness around food and sustainability and issues around food. Even greenies weren't, they would still go to Macca's or McDonald's or a pub or Coles and Woolies. Probably a lot of greenies still go to Coles and Woolies, not aware that food is critical to climate change and a whole bunch of other things. And that's what led us to La Vie Campesina, this 300 million farmers who all talk about climate change. That's all, the whole thing is about climate change. Small farmers, will cool the earth. Small farmers are cool and all that sort of stuff. So it led us to, integrating with those groups, incorporating their philosophies and their ideas, and how we can, on this marathon journey, build a better food system for all people, because there's shitloads of everything for everyone. We just need to learn how to share it and participate in that sharing. So that's part of the story. Out of time. Perfect. Thank you.